Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and welcome to another episode of Hopium Maximum. This is a series I do every once in a while when there's a theory or idea that we've been talking about for the last few months, or in this case, the last few years, that seems to have a decent amount of evidence for it to suggest that it may actually happen. However, because so much time has passed, now most people have given up on the idea. It seems a bit unrealistic, but there's still something about it that makes sense, so it's worth making one more argument, one more case for this happening. And so in this case, I'm doing that for The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD. I think it still might just come to Nintendo Switch, even though, given how long we've been waiting, it feels like it might be a bit of a stretch. And yes, there is some recent new evidence. But before going forward, let me take this moment to ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit the notification bell, and if you're unsure, watch through this video and then consider subscribing and hitting that bell. So Wind Waker HD has been something we've been hoping to see for a very long time. Both it and Twilight Princess HD have been rumored for years, half a decade or so it seems. Going back to his Reddit post from 4 years ago, Andy Robinson insists that Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD will be coming on Switch. Andy Robinson, that, as far as I'm aware, was the first person to report that Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD will be coming on Switch, insisted on Twitter that it is still happening, but possibly a bit later than expected. Now, Andy Robinson is a journalist from Video Games Chronicle, and going back to his original tweet on this, you can see here that it was deleted. However, he followed up and said, "Update on this for everyone who's now flooding my mentions. Predicting dates is a fool's game, and I should have never used 100% in the original tweet. Zelda fans, sit tight." And so I do understand where Andy Robinson is coming from here. Predicting dates is a fool's game. It's fun to do, but you gotta do it knowing that there's a really good chance you're not gonna get it right, especially in the case of Nintendo, because they've been known to save games, hold them, switch things up all the time, and so, yeah, it's been tough. But also, this was years ago. We're at the end of 2024, and nothing has happened yet in terms of news on Wind Waker or Twilight Princess HD, at least officially from Nintendo. In terms of Twilight Princess specifically, it did feel like there might have been a little bit of smoke earlier this year, but nothing has materialized since, and personally at this point, I kind of feel it might just make more sense to not release Twilight Princess HD and just focus on maybe remaking the game from the ground up as something really new and cool years down the road, because I think we'll probably see an Ocarina of Time remake first, then Majora's Mask given that it's a direct sequel years after that, and then years after that, we could see Twilight Princess. Of course, given how much time we're talking here, they could still probably do both. And if Nintendo is sitting on both these games, we might still see both at one point or another. But in the case of Wind Waker HD, about a month or so back, we talked about this listing from videoigr.net, a Russian retail site, and they listed Wind Waker HD. Now, retail listings don't necessarily mean a game is about to be announced, but sometimes it does. For this specific website, they have a couple times in the past listed a game, and then shortly afterwards, that game is announced. And so we are hoping that the same will be the case for Wind Waker HD, but it hasn't happened yet, and so I'm starting to grow a bit skeptical, especially because when this site put up this listing, we had also seen that Pyoro, a famous Nintendo leaker, had updated their Twitter page. Their Twitter page included a banner that was wavy or watery, which led us to think that they might have been teasing something having to do with waves or water, like Wind Waker HD. But nothing has happened since this apparent tease, and typically when it comes to Pyoro teases, they happen shortly before announcement, and there's been no announcement. Now, maybe Pyoro was just messing with us, it's possible. Normally he's teasing something. It might not be the thing we're thinking, but he's normally teasing something when he does something. So maybe something will still materialize, but because so much time has passed since then, I am skeptical. However, we have new evidence that has entered the fray here that is helping to stir the pot for this conversation and giving us just a little bit more hopium here. Some hopium maximum, even. So firstly, when we go to Gamefly, and by the way, this was initially discovered by Mike Odyssey, I saw it on his channel first. If you search Twilight Princess, you're not going to see a Twilight Princess listing for Nintendo Switch. If you search Twilight Princess Amiibo, you'll get nothing. However, if you search Wind Waker, you will see an Amiibo listing, Amiibo Zelda, the Legend of Zelda Wind Waker series for Nintendo Switch. And so this is Gamefly, right? This isn't like a random retailer. Gamefly is a pretty well-known company. So I do find this very curious. Now, we could be getting a Wind Waker reprint for the Amiibos, and maybe that's all it is. It's not tied to necessarily a game. But if there's going to be more Amiibo for Wind Waker, then maybe that also means there could be a game. And this gets interesting when we consider everything else we've discussed, and something else that has popped up recently. So going back to Twitter, we have this post from 𝐇𝐨𝐩𝐢𝐮𝐦. They did a great job of talking about a very interesting observation. So here they talk about how the Legend of Zelda Wind Waker was never translated for Korea. Like, the manuals and stuff were done, but the actual game itself was never localized for South Korea, the original release. And they started localizing different games in South Korea afterwards for Zelda, but Wind Waker was before that cutoff. And then for Wii U, it never came to Korea, so there was never a translation of the Wind Waker. But what's interesting is that they have discovered that beforehand on the official Zelda website for Korea, there was no update to the Wind Waker, and then all of a sudden, there has been. There is a translation for the Wind Waker here. So it seems that behind the scenes, there has been a translation done for the Wind Waker HD for South Korea, when it had not happened before. It was never done for the Wii U version, it was never done for the GameCube version, and now it's appearing. Now, Pixel does bring up that maybe at one point they did actually get a translation for the Wii U version, but because Wii U never came to Korea, we never saw it, and we're just seeing that info now. But considering that there's an Amiibo listing, considering that there's a retail listing, considering that this might be pointing towards an actual translation, a new translation that was never done before for the Wind Waker, and that we do have various reports from years back that Nintendo has been sitting on Wind Waker HD, it does seem like this game can still come. It does seem like this game is real. Nintendo did prepare a Switch version, and for whatever reason, they have not released it. Now, unlike Twilight Princess, Wind Waker is a game that is essentially timeless, especially after the remastered version from Wii U. It looks beautiful and it's aged really well. Something like Twilight Princess, however, it hasn't aged so well, even with the remastered version. There's much more of a clear need to remake Twilight Princess than there is Wind Waker, is my point here. And so a Wii U Wind Waker HD game adapted for Switch would probably do pretty well by today's standards still. And it's also something that us fans have been clamoring for such a long time. It's an easy way to make a decent amount of money for Nintendo here. So it seems like an obvious thing to do. But I guess the question is, when would Nintendo do it? Is a timeline for a Wind Waker HD release still going to fit into the Switch era? We've been talking a lot about Switch 2 lately, and spoiler alert, we are going to continue to talk about Switch 2 a lot more for a very long time. Because it's the next generation of Nintendo, this is the future and we are transitioning over. But just because we are transitioning over, does not mean that the Switch 1 is totally done. There's been a lot of conversation lately how the Switch might catch the Nintendo DS or even the PS2 in terms of overall lifetime sales. And I think it's getting very close. I think it's going to happen. But some people have speculated that Nintendo's going to hold off on Switch 2 until Nintendo sells enough Switches so it becomes the best-selling console of all time. And let me just tell you, this is not going to happen, or at least that's not what they're going to do. Nintendo doesn't necessarily care that much about becoming the best-selling console of all time. What's more important is just continued strong sales and longevity moving forward, so they're not going to ruin their potential success for Switch 2, squeeze out as much sales as possible for Switch 1. However, looking at Nintendo DS, looking at PS2, these consoles continue to sell after their successors came out. And this is something Nintendo did with 3DS as well. There were published Nintendo titles coming out for 3DS years into the Switch's life cycle. And so given how successful Switch has been and how strong the momentum still is this late into the generation, I think it's more than a reasonable expectation to think that Nintendo will continue to push Switch even after Switch 2 comes out. And so what that means is, there will still be some games coming to Nintendo Switch. They're probably going to be pretty much only remasters. There might be some smaller new games, but pretty much for the most part, just remasters. But that could also include Wind Waker HD, and I would say that Wind Waker HD makes more sense than most other remasters because it has the most sales potential. Most Zelda fans would love to see this on the console. So while trying to predict the date when Nintendo will announce and release Wind Waker HD for Switch is probably, yes, a bit of a fool's game, as said by Andy Robinson years ago, we are in the waning years of Nintendo Switch, and at any point within the next couple years, it probably would make a lot of sense to put the game on the console. Yes, there are going to be big Zelda offerings on Switch 2, but you might still want to give some Zelda fans still on Switch 1 some love as well. And so I do think Wind Waker HD still makes a lot of sense. I do think it's probably going to come. Is it going to come in the next few months? Is it going to come in the next year? In the next 2 years? That remains to be seen, but I still feel good in predicting that we will see this game again. I do think it will come out for Nintendo Switch because it still has years of relevance left, even if Switch 2 is coming out next May or June, as many have been reporting as of late. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.